All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and as part of the Rankin Technical College AWD 1000 Web Development Technologies course, I've been creating a series of video presentations that are based on the Mozilla Developer Network Learn Web Development series. We're finishing up, hopefully, the web forms section, and we're up to working with user data. This is the advanced part, and the first one of three is how to build custom form controls. And as it says, there are cases where the available controls may not seem like enough. For example, if you need to perform advanced styling, or if you want to provide custom behaviors, you might want to build your own control. In this article, we will discuss how to build a custom control. To that end, we will work at an example rebuilding the select element. We will discuss how, when, and where building your own controls makes sense, and what to consider, as far as what you're doing with it. All right, and it says we'll focus on building the control, not making it generic and reusable, because that would involve a lot of JavaScript. All right. Before designing a custom control, you should start by figuring out exactly what you want. Well, we've talked about this kind of thing before. For example, we've looked at before you start to create a website, you should have some kind of an idea, the pages that are going to be in there. And you should, like lay out each page. Now we're getting even more granular here, because what we're talking about is, well, you've decided, yeah, I need this control, but there isn't exactly one like it, so I'm going to create my own, which is fine. But you should, again, sketch out what you want that control to do then. It's important to clearly define all the states of your control. To do this, it's good to start with an existing control so that you can mimic the default states and behaviors as much as possible. In our example, we will rebuild the select element. Here's what we want to achieve. It says here the screenshot shows the three main states of the control: the normal state, the active state, and the open state. Now, what's the difference? These two look very similar, except this one has a light green border around it. All right. In terms of behavior, we are recreating a native HTML element. Therefore, it should have the same behaviors. In other words, it should be an intuitive control. And if people end up using your control, they should be used to using it, because it should act and react like the control that it's based off of. Again, hopefully, except that it'll have a little bit extra functionality. We require our control to be usable with a mouse as well as a keyboard, and comprehensible to a screen reader like any native control. Let's start by defining how the control reaches each state. The control is in a normal state when the page loads. The control is active and the user clicks anywhere outside of it. And the control was active and the user moves the focus to another control. The control is in an active state when the user clicks on it or touches it on a touch screen. The user hits the tab key and it gains focus, or the user was in an open state and the user clicks on it. Finally, it's in its open state, which again has that green border, as you can see around it, when the control is in any other state than open and the user clicks on it. So once we know how to change states, all right, so the value changes when the user clicks on an option, when the control is in an open state. Well, that would make sense. So again, if you're up here and it's on cherry and you click on lemon, it would make sense. Or the user hits the up or down arrow keys when the control is in the active state. All right. The value does not change when the user hits the up arrow key when the first option is selected, or hits the down arrow key when the last option is selected. In other words, it's not circular. It doesn't wrap around. Finally, let's define how the control's options will behave. When the control is open, the selected option is highlighted. When the mouse is over an option, the option is highlighted, and the previously highlighted option is returned to its normal state. As it says, for the purposes of this example, we'll stop with that. However, you might notice that some behaviors were missing. You can read those if you want. It says another thing to think about, besides that, is what will happen if the user hits the up or down arrow key while the control is in the open state. All right. We have to think a little bit further. What happens if they press the escape key? So these are all things that you want to think about. Why? Because sooner or later, someone who uses your website, uses your control, is going to do this, whether it's purposely or accidentally. And it says here in this example, the missing specs are obvious, so we will handle them, but it can be a real problem for exotic new controls. Again, that's why one thing is, if it turns out that you can modify an existing control rather than trying to create something on your own from scratch, you're probably going to be better off. All right. When it comes to standardized elements, of which the select is one, the specification authors spent a lot of time specifying all interactions for every use case, for every input device. Creating new controls is not that easy, especially if you're creating something that's not been done before. Designing new interactions is generally only an option for large industry players who have enough reach. In other words, why would you want to do this? All right. Well, there may be a really good reason to do it. I mean, you may come up with either what you consider to be a fix or an add to an existing control or a new control. But as you're first learning this stuff, it's probably not something that's going to be in your repertoire. All right. It is best not to invent new user interactions. For any interaction you do add, it is vital to spend time in the design stage. As is, if you forget to define it properly or forget to define it, it'll be hard to redefine it once users have gotten used to it. All right. It says if you have doubts, ask others for their opinion. All right. And if you have the budget, perform user tests. All right. This is known as UX design. So in other words, you might pay people to come in and test your product. Now, for years, Microsoft, what they did was they actually charged people to use beta versions, basically, of their products. And then typically they'd give them a free version when it came out. But it was great, great marketing and great idea strategy. It says if you want to learn more about the topic, here's some more things that you can look at. All right. Also, in most systems, there is a way to open the select element with a keyboard to look at all the available choices. Typically, for example, with Alt down in Windows. We didn't implement this with our example, but it wouldn't be hard to do. All right. So, all right, we're at 7 minutes. We should at least be able to get a good start onto this. Defining the structure and then some semantics. It says now that the control's basic functionality has been decided upon, it's time to start building it. The first step is to define the HTML structure and give it some semantics. Here is what we need to rebuild the select element. All right, so it says this is the main container for the control, so you can see everything that's in there. Now, a couple things. It says note the use of class names. Etc. These identify each relevant part regardless of the underlying HTML. So when in doubt, add it. This is important to make sure we don't bind our CSS and JavaScript to a strong HTML structure. Again, we want this separation of concerns. We'll want our CSS to be in our CSS file, our JavaScript in our JavaScript file, and our HTML in our HTML file, etc. Class names, it says, provide no semantic value. All right. I mean, option doesn't really say very much, for example. All right. Creating the look and feel using CSS. Now that we have a structure, we can start designing our control. The whole point of building this custom control is to be able to style it exactly the way we want. To that end, we split the CSS into two parts. The first part will be the rules absolutely necessary to make the control behave like a select element. And the second will be the fancy stuff that we want to add to it. So the required styles that are necessary to handle the three states of the control are shown right here. We need an extra class active to define the look and feel when it's in the active state. Because our control is focusable, we double the custom style with the :focus pseudo class in order to make sure that it'll behave the same. And then here's the options. Now, it looks like, at least so far, they haven't gone through, and I'm not going through and writing all this. Can we do that? Well, of course we can. All right, would that be a good thing to do? I don't know. But let's come in here and do this. All right, so let's come into our, we're working with, not exactly forms, but I'll put that in here and I'll put down here, make a folder and we'll call this advanced. And here we're going to put another folder, we're going to call it custom select, because that's pretty much what it is. All right, now let me jump up one. Let me grab, I don't know, it doesn't matter which one. I'm going to grab this my first form. I'm going to grab the entire thing here, copy it to the clipboard, close this, open up a new one, paste that. All right, and just change this title. We don't want my first form anymore. We will end up having a style section in here. We'll just put everything inline or internal. All right, and then let's get rid of this as well. All right, so let's see if we can build this ourselves by using their code, of course. So this is what we're going to put in there. So that goes here. All right, now let's come in and do the style. And they've done it in pieces, as you've already seen. So we've got this. This. And again, I've already mentioned this, but to me, I very much appreciate the fact that they're going to all this trouble and they're explaining some stuff that probably you wouldn't be doing, at least not as a beginning developer. That said, again, because you're pretty much everybody watching this as a beginning developer, I don't think this is the stuff most people would be using. Again, that's my opinion for whatever it is or is not worth. Well, I thought I'd saved it, and evidently I had not. All right. So now we have the basic functionality in place. The fun can start. Well, let's just see what it looks like right now. That's not the right one. That is. So right now, that's what it looks like. All right. I don't think I'm missing anything. So it says, let's add some beautification. Okay. And I've said this kind of thing to you before, that this is how you learn. You know, not to belittle myself, any of my counterparts, etc. But as much as you learn in the classroom, you typically will learn a lot more by just sitting and trying things yourselves. Now let's style the list of options. And I guess they will give this to you then. So we can take a look and see if how ours is doing compared to the actual one itself. A lot of CSS in here, but again, you kind of expect that, as again, we are styling our own control to make it act the way we want it to act. Now, I guess I could have just gone in and copied their source, but as you know, I've not been doing that. So let's look. All right, so that's what we've got right now. Okay, you can see we do have the greenish look around it. So let's see. right. Bringing your control to life with JavaScript. Sounds like a good place to end. We're about halfway through and we'll pick this up on the next portion.